This was an interview with a cost segregation expert, and cost segregation is something that I've kind of paid attention to for the last 3 or 4 years, but I really haven't dug in. Haven't done it on any of my personal properties. And after listening to this interview and interviewing Mark, I'm probably going to test this out on my personal property. So I'm excited to share this interview with you. If you have any questions, please reach out to me or my team. Information is below in this YouTube video. Reaching out and wanting to educate the viewers and myself around cost segregation. I know there's just tons of options of people out there that giving advice, and some are probably reputable and some are probably not, as we all know in any industry. And wanted to give you the chance to go through your presentation and share with me. I'm going to ask questions that I have personally, and then also my viewers. I actually reached out to a Facebook group and said, hey, what are the questions that people have about cost segs? And what can I ask you as you're doing this presentation? Those questions in here and there, nothing too crazy. I'll kind of let you take it from here and I'll chirp in when I have questions. Does that work?
That sounds great.
Thank you very much. I got it pulled up, the cost seg.
This first page, it just says cost segregation overview. By accelerating depreciation, this strategy will reduce income tax by around $35,000 for every $500,000 in building cost basis owned. A lot of CPAs, cost segregation is an engineering service. Most CPAs are not going to do engineering-based cost segregation unless they're really a large firm. Most of them are going to refer it to a company like ours. Cost segregation, when it first started in like the late 80s, it was only really very large corporations, very large building projects that used this because it was so expensive. When they first started, companies would have to send a whole bank of engineers to a building. We started in 2001. Our president started this process by making it more affordable. So now we could work on projects that were down in the probably 200,000 up to 400,000. As you can see, they're 400 million actually. The point was that it became more affordable so that building owners with smaller building costs could take advantage of this. So if we move to the second page.
This was an interview with a cost segregation expert, and cost segregation is something that I've kind of paid attention to for the last 3 or 4 years, but I really haven't dug in. Haven't done it on any of my personal properties. And after listening to this interview and interviewing Mark, I'm probably going to test this out on my personal property. So I'm excited to share this interview with you. If you have any questions, please reach out to me or my team. Information is below in this YouTube video.
When you buy a commercial building, if it's like an office building or whatever, it's going to get this depreciated over 39 years, or apartments would be 27 and a half. So they get a little bit every year. But there's components in the building that have a shorter life, like carpet, drop ceiling, electrical, cabinet. Those are things that we can classify because they have a shorter life. When we do an engineering study, we can break out the building and then push that stuff to the fronts because it has a shorter life. If you look at it, for every $1 million in building cost basis, a building owner is probably going to see about $60,000 in tax savings that first year. In the middle there, when would you not receive benefit from cost seg? You don't have a tax liability. If you've owned the building for more than 15 years, then you've probably taken enough depreciation. Whereas here it says improvement costs $300,000 or more. We're doing buildings that are probably closer to $200,000 or more. There's benefit there. If you're planning on selling the building within the next 4 years, the main reason for that is if they keep the building for at least 4 years, then there's no recapture penalties. And some of this I'm going to skip over. We move down to the next page. This just is a little history of cost segregation. It kind of talks about how it came to be. There's just some experts and some things that are said about cost seg and the reason why it's effective. If you go down to the next page, this is the fourth page kind of overview that I send to people. Usually what we'll do is we'll run a free analysis for them. We ask them a few questions about their building. Basically these are the questions. There's a few more than this that we ask, but what's your property used for? Is it retail, office, apartment, mixed use? When did you buy the building? Month, year, the cost of most building owners, what we do is we do a free analysis for them. So we're going to send them a list of questions, and that's what these are. So we can run an analysis for them, a brief description on what the building is used for. When did you purchase the building? What was the purchase price? Did that price include land? We'll usually take out about 20% if they don't give us that. That's usually what a CPA is going to use too. Have you done renovations, build outs? What were the costs there? General square footage, is there a parking lot? And then what's the name or address of the building so we can identify that on the analysis. So these are questions that we will just send out to an owner that'll give us an idea on how to set up the analysis, okay? This is what we would send to the building owner. The first 4 pages of an analysis are basically kind of a history, kind of a overview of what cost segregation is. And usually what I'll tell people is, if you can just read through this it'll give you kind of an understanding of the basics of cost segregation. If you go down to page 11, so this would be, let's say that you see where it says the grocery store, outlet, retail. This would be page 5 of an analysis. And this is kind of the beginning of what the numbers look like. This is what the owners want to know, two things. They want to know, how much money am I going to save in taxes and what is it going to cost me? Well, this is the first page. Here's how we break this out. If you look at the top green line there, it says building costs. It was $3,518,000. It was acquired in August of 2021. So this would have been for tax year 2021. And if you follow it down to the bottom, you will see that the bottom of the box there, estimated accumulated tax savings benefit was $270,716. This would have been the amount that they would see, like, let's say that they owe $300,000 on taxes. That would basically cancel out all but about $30,000 of that. So that's why they do this. And we always estimate conservatively, I'd say about 90% of the time, we have, it's going to come in higher if the numbers they give us are correct. We always do that because we want to make sure that we don't want to over project. What happens here is that if you look at the middle area where it says alternative method, cost segregation, accumulated depreciation, and it says 100% bonus. What that means is that in 2018, Congress, with that tax law change under Trump, this was one of the benefits that came out of this for building owners. What it meant was that $270,000 was able to be used all in 1 year. Before that, cost segregation, they would still get the same $270,000, but it would have been broken out over 5 years. They would get like 1/5 of it, and it would spread out over the next 5 years. Well, 100% bonus depreciation made it so that they could use the whole thing in 1 year. Now, that is phasing out. This year, it's at 80%. Next year, it'll be 60%. The year after that, and eventually in 5 years, it'll go back to where you split it out over 5 years. But still this year, for 2023, it's 80%. So it's still used most of it in that given year.
No, I think that makes sense. So help me out with the phasing. So this year, it's 80%. And then you can take the other 20% next year in 2024?
Yeah, that's how that would work. That's right. Yep. And then what will happen is that in 25, get 60, and then 2020, so exactly right. It'll start to spread back out to over 5 years.
Still,
so that's why
it's still
the same number.
Yeah. Is it based to that 270? That's based if every year you have a 37% tax rate?
Yeah, that's based on 37% tax. If that tax, that's a good question. If that tax rate is different or significantly different than usually we ask the client, let us know if you're in a significantly different tax bracket than that, and we'll adjust this. But we use that figure, for most people, that is pretty close,
Yeah.
Let's go down to page 12 of graph. The blue line shows if they did standard depreciation. The red line shows, cost segregation. And this is one of the reasons why we want them to keep the building for at least 4 years. They're taking a big chunk of it right there. Usually they're going to see about cost segregation is going to probably 15 to 22%. Because people sometimes ask, am I going to have any depreciation in the future? Well, you can see that once the 4 years is done, you're still going to have depreciation coming out over the next, let's say, 39 years. The thing is that if you kept that building for 39 years, the government would basically get all their money back anyway. But you're just getting a spike. In the beginning, that cash flow is worth more, have it in your hand now. But the other thing about this is that most people don't keep buildings for 39 years. I'd say the average is about 16. That's what the U.S. average is right now. They're really taking advantage of this. They don't have to keep the building for all that 39 years to pay all that back. They're getting the benefit, but then after 4 years, they can sell that building. But that's one of the things that we try to let people know. That's the reason why we wanted to keep that building for at least 4 years. If they were to sell it before that, then it'd be recaptured. So they know that going in, they're planning on keeping that building. Now, if you go to the next page, this basically breaks out all the numbers with or without cost segregation. There's a lot of numbers here. Usually the CPA is going to look at all this, but it just takes every year. And it shows, if you want to look at that upper left-hand corner, there's a box there that says with analysis, without analysis. And we'll see where it says 5-year property. In this grocery store example, 14% was in 5-year. Now, if you go down to the 15-year, there was 7%. They had about 21% of it pushed to the front, but that still left 89% of it in the depreciation going forward, like those two lines showed. That's the benefit. They're able to use this money now as they move forward. It just breaks down everything. It shows that our fee in this situation was $64.80. But in a 37% tax rate, the estimated fee after tax is about $4,082. So they get to write off the fee too. And so, when they look at it like return on investment, to be able to gain $270,000 after our fee, there's still $263 back in their pocket that they otherwise would have paid to the government. That's what they're looking at. If you look at the next page, this would be page 14. This is something that I just put in so that people can kind of understand when I do a presentation. This is kind of the stuff that winds up in that 5-year category. This is the stuff with the shorter lighting. And we break it all out, and it has valuation on it too. So that if you look at follow that column down, the very top line, it says 5-year, 15-year, 39-year. Do you see that?
Yep.
Now, if you follow that down, we put 5-year cabinet, molding, decorative, flooring, wall covering, all that, lighting. You follow that all the way down, and you'll see at the bottom that there was 217,000. 12% was in that 5-year. Now, if you look at...
Do you own multifamily properties? Whether it's 2 units, 3 units, 4 units, 10 units, 25 units, or above. If you do, you probably know that there's only a few number of agents that are very educated on those type of properties. I see it every single day when we see listings come up that are listed by agents that they really do residential properties. They don't dabble with the multifamily, small multifamily properties. And one of the things that I offer my clients when I help them list their properties is a front-end consultation. I want to talk with you 3, 6, 12 months prior to when you're going to sell the property so that we can get an evaluation of what it's probably going to sell and maybe even what you could do to maximize rents. It's amazing how many buyers, if you own properties, you're probably looking to buy too. If you up rents prior to selling the property, because if you increase rents, people want to buy on actuals. So you selling a property with low rents, knowing that you could increase them easily, is actually not doing a good service to you in your pocketbook. I want to help you determine what are those low-hanging fruit things on a consult on what you could do. This doesn't mean I have to walk the property. If you give me the address and you give me the data around it, I can probably give you an idea, hey, this is probably what it's going to list at. This is roughly what it's going to sell at. And it's possible that I could have a buyer in my pocket that is saying, hey, Darson, I want this type of property. Do you know anyone that wants it? And I could connect you to, and we could have a transaction. You don't have to interrupt the tenants more than a couple times. Maybe first on the walkthrough, second on the inspection. I just would really love to help people list their properties at a price and in a way that is going to net them and get them the most amount of money. If that's you, please reach out below. Information is below. I'll give you a quick first level evaluation very easily. Then we can dig in further if you're like, hey, I want a consult. I want to know what I can improve to increase the net operating income of my property, because that's really what investors are buying. They're buying your property as a business. So if that's you, please reach out. I'd be happy to help.
The next area where it says site work, improvements, more of that would be, that's in the middle section there. That would be parking lot, landscaping, dumpster enclosure, retaining walls. That number would wind up being in that next category. If you put that 12 and 13, that was about 25%. Well, that still left 65%. What was left in the 39 year. You kind of see how we broke the kind of stuff that I like people to be able to see, what are we accelerating here? You know what I mean?
Very beneficial.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, good. Okay. I just thought that would help for people to understand, not only that they can see kind of what we are breaking out, but also they are seeing, some actual numbers here. Now, we put a valuation on all this stuff because CPAs are having to deal with the thing right now called tangible property regulation. Let's say there's an AC unit or something, or, they have to redo the carpet or whatever. We've already put a valuation on some of this so that they know it helps them in the future, because now we've got numbers that they can work off of. It helps them to understand if the client does something in the future, they know more clearly how to either expense it or capitalize it. That's a whole separate issue, but that's one of the reasons why we put valuation on this. Now, if you look at the next page 15, this shows 6480, and what our clients do is they'll pay half when we start, they'll pay the other half when we're done, and it takes about 6 weeks to complete a study. If you go down to the next page, that would be page 16. This is basically what we call engagement letter. A client will start their information. The left side would be their office, so we can communicate and all that. The right side would be the property address. If they're having us do one building, they just put that address in there, the full address. If they had us do a second building, or if there's multiple buildings, they can just put all the addresses down on a separate piece of paper. We can either do a DocuSign, or they can fill this in and email it back to me. We'll tell them that we'd like to get this in probably a couple, 3 weeks before the deadline, because we're going to have to start gathering some info about the building, and I'll show you that in a second. Let's go down to the next page. This is a checklist then of info that we gather. See where the green lines are?
Yep.
Newly acquired property, that's the third line down. Owned for more than 1 year. We usually will get let's say it's a property that they purchased in 2022. They're going to give us like a documentation of what the building cost was from their CPA. If they have blueprints, or if they have an appraisal, or some kind of floor plan, they're going to send that. They'll email that to us. We are going to schedule someone to go to the building and take pictures of everything. That's the reason why we like to have this extra time to be able to get all this done, that 6-week period that we need to do the study. Once we have everything in, then it takes about 6 weeks to do the engineering study and complete this. But this is gathering information time. Now, if they've owned the building for more than 1 year, then they'd have a depreciation schedule and they would send that to us. Still ask for blueprints, appraisal, any cost documents. We usually, what the owner will do is they'll give us a contact person and we'll contact to schedule a time for someone to come and take pictures. So they might meet us there. Usually what they're going to do is, let's say it's an office building, the owner's going to call the manager or whoever's renting his building and he's going to say, someone's going to be coming in to take pictures. They'll just tell them up front. So when the photographer gets there, they kind of know what's going on. They're just going to go room to room, grab a few pictures, take pictures of the outside. And so all that with the blueprints, appraisal, whatever they have, we're putting it all together into that study. That's why we like that extra time. If you go down to the next page, the next 2 pages, these are just some examples. If you look at, I just grabbed a bunch of different types of buildings, but if you look at, you see photos from various projects,
Yep.
Like the car dealership, they had a $400,000 tax benefit savings. We do a lot of Walgreens, office, Morgan Stanley, that was an office building. Just grabbed a few different ones, a lot of hotels, the second page. We're also doing now a lot of multifamily, even like single family, maybe a couple 100,000, multifamily, huge apartment building could be, very large. But if you look at hotels, if you use the comparison, let's say somebody bought $1 million warehouse or $1 million hotel. The warehouse is still going to have some stuff in it, but the hotel is going to have a lot more. It's going to have more carpeting. It's going to have, all the rooms, all the cabinets, all the lighting, and the cost and the detail is tied into that. So let's say we had $1 million warehouse and they might see maybe 50,000 in tax savings off of that. Our fee would be based on the complexity. If the hotel is going to maybe 240,000, or on $1 million, they might see 70 or 80 or 90,000. See what I mean? Just because there's a lot more stuff.
Does it matter how old the stuff is? So like a multifamily that, was built in the 70s that hasn't been updated, is that going to have a bigger cost seg than the same size, same number of units, but was built in the late 2010s?
Well, it could. It just depends on, let's say the building was built in the 70s, but the owner just bought it. Or let's say it was just built a year ago and he just bought that one. It goes more off of the cost. So let's say they paid $1 million for each of them. They're probably going to have very similar cost benefit numbers because It goes off of what they paid for the building and the amount of components that are in that building. Now, if you had a hotel, let's say they had a hotel that was built in the 70s, they paid $1 million for it. We take out 20% for land. Just, that's our estimate. But let's say because it's an older building, now they're renovating it. Let's say they're going to put another $1 million in the renovation. That renovation be huge for cost segregation because the renovation is probably none of that is structural. It's all going to be like, carpeting, they're going to update things. And so a lot of that is non-structural stuff that we can break out in. Maybe a newer building doesn't need that, so they might not have that. That's the only difference. But as far as the numbers go, if they paid $1 million and they're similar buildings, they're probably going to have pretty similar cost savings numbers. It just goes on when they purchased it. The only time it would really matter would be like, let's say they bought that building in the 70s. Well, now they've already depreciated it out, so it's not really going to, cost segregation is not really going to help them. If it goes over 15 years, and there's even some gray area there. Sometimes I've had buildings where 16 years, we'll still do an analysis for them because they might have enough still be very beneficial for them. So we don't mind running if it's on the fence sort of area, we do not mind doing an analysis for them.
For the free analysis, I'm going to go to that page. What is the information bare minimum that you're going to need to estimate?
If you go back to page 5.
Yep. That bullet points, those are the questions. And that's going to give you enough to estimate.
That's right. And so description of what the building is, strip mall, mixed use. When did you purchase it? Month and year. What was the purchase price? Did that price include land or not? And most of the time when they give it to us, it probably included land. So we extract the 20%. We may estimate a building at 20%, but let's say it's in Hawaii, or let's say it's in an area where California area where the land costs are really high. They may adjust that for us and say 20%, maybe a little less sometimes.
This is for only properties that you do not live in, correct? So if someone was buying a fourplex living in one unit, does that matter, I guess?
Most of the time it's rental property. That's a really good question. If they did, then I would check that out. We'd look at the situation and find out if we could run an analysis on the other 3 units because they're still renting out the other 3 units. We'd have to do kind of a breakout on that.
And they might be, they might own the LLC that owns the building, but they're renting from their own LLC. So be a one-off and we'd have to look into that.
Right. So there are areas and we figure that out as we're doing the analysis.
Yep. One of the questions I had from somebody was just the, and don't take this the wrong way, the validity of an online cost seg as opposed to someone that comes out. It sounds like you do have someone that comes out. So this would not be a fully online product, at least what you guys do, correct?
Right. Yeah. I've had people that'll say, well, I've got pictures. I'll send you all the pictures, but we still have to have someone go to the building and take pictures. We have to have that because when we break this out, we have to be able to stand behind it. We tell them that any numbers that we have ever done, if they come into question by the IRS, we'll step in to identify them or to, defend our numbers. We've done over 30,000 studies now in all 50 states. And we've never had our numbers spark an audit. We have had 5 or 6 that have been audited, just kind of explained our numbers, but they didn't spark the audit. And that's one of the reasons why you have to have the detail and why it takes as long as it does. When we hand off that study to them, they've got everything they need is right there. Or if we're in the study a ways, maybe the CPA says, well, we're doing this and this, and there's this much going on. We'll have a discussion with that CPA. One of our senior analysts will set up a meeting. We can break everything out for them so they know exactly what we're doing. We like to do that so that everybody's on the same page.
Yeah, because I would imagine that the CPAs tread lightly and make sure they have all their ducks in a row.
Exactly. They don't want the liability. That's why they're using a company like ours. If you have 3 companies and they're all using the same criteria, the numbers should be very, very close.
Yeah,
if they weren't, people don't understand that. Building owners sometimes don't. And so we have to explain that to them, that we run it on a lower benchmark. People will give us numbers and we find out later that, like I had one recently where the guy, I'm working on it right now, where the guy, another question here where we now added, and this is in the bank of, it isn't in here, but it's in a bank of questions that we ask. Is there a 1031 exchange involved in this purchase? That's on our bank of questions. We had one recently where the guy said, here's my numbers. Well, he didn't tell us there was a 1031 exchange. Well, that means we can't use that full number. There's a formula that we use based on the previous building that he rolled into this one. So we have to get that cost basis from the CPA. Well, that lowered the cost basis because he did have a 1031 exchange. So we are now asking that in addition to these other questions. So we've got those numbers.
What about if someone buys on contract from the seller that maybe they just own it outright or they took over a loan? Because you have a purchase price and you have a monthly payment. And so your cost basis might be more than the actual building if you're extending terms out. So how does that work if you buy on contract?
That's another one of those situations where we would do it, when we do the analysis, we would have all that information and we would get like one of our senior analysts to break that out so that we'd have a clear understanding of what's going on there. Usually that's a good question. And that's one of those areas that we would go into detailed discussion on.
Gotcha. So it isn't like you just can't do it. It just might not be, it's not going to be the same.
We will arrive at the accurate number, but sometimes it takes a little discussion, odd situations, different things. Then we're going to have a discussion on that. So if somebody says, I'm making payments, we'll just make sure that we understand exactly how the cost basis is arrived at.
How about, I have a lot of folks they'll buy, for example, this last month we had a client that bought 5 duplexes. All from the same owner, roughly $1 million purchase, 5 different duplexes. Now they're all just over $200,000 property each, right? How does that, would it be a fee for each of those? Or could you lump it all into one cost seg? How's that work?
Well, if you have 5 duplexes that are all on the same land, let's say they all share the same plot of land, duplexes that are all in in the same basic address. Like for instance, if the addresses of the duplex said 2022, 2024, 2026, that means, if they're all in the same plot of land, then we could run those as one study. If they're all separate addresses and they're scattered around, then they each have to be a separate study. One of the areas that people have to look at, because our minimum fee is going to be at $1,950 because we still have to do all the same work. We still takes us 6 weeks. We still have to send somebody to each building and take pictures. We still have to have all the same documentation in. Let's say we had 5, it was $1 million, 200,000, but now we're taking 20% out for land on each one. Let's say that our fee is $1,950 and each building, they're going to see $12,000 in tax savings somewhere in there. They're going to look at it, well, is this worth it? I'm spending $2,000 to gain 12. Then they're looking at it like, if there's 5 buildings, I'm spending about 10 grand, but I'm putting 50,000 back in my pocket too. And especially with the 100% and 80% bonus depreciation on smaller projects, that is a big thing because they're not splitting that small number out over 5 years. They're going to think more about a smaller one like that. It's a good question. If they look at it like,
I do that math and I'm like, I'd pay $2,000 all day long to receive $10,000 in tax savings because it's still
exactly.
It's still a very good return.
That's exactly right. We tell people that too. Just say, hey, would you rather write that check or would you rather put that 10 grand back in your pocket? It's
Yeah.
your money. Since each building, if it was like, let's say it was like all on one plot of land, then we have 5 buildings that all total up to $1 million. Then we take, then we're at 800,000 if we take the land out, and then we can run that under one study fee. That's the difference. But if we're all scattered all over a town, then we have to do individual studies. And there's been a lot of those this last few years, but it's still beneficial.
Same. I mean,
And a lot of times,
the same would go for if you bought like 100 single family properties. It's much tougher to do cost seg on that than if you bought one apartment building for 10 million versus 100, however that math.
Yeah, it's just, this is a good question. I'm going to send you some info on apartment buildings and on single family rentals.
Yeah.
Do you mind?
Yeah, absolutely.
And that'll help explain your question. Those are really good questions because we do deal with that. A lot of people you said, they're going to look at it like still money in my pocket.
No, I appreciate it. Send that over and I'll send it out to everybody when we look at this video or we post this video. To get a hold of you, you've kind of sprinkled your name and number in here throughout the presentation. I'm going to pull it up. I will make sure it goes connected to the video that we publish. Here's I've got your mark and then your email. Well, I appreciate if this was beneficial, please subscribe to the channel. I try to produce information and videos that educates investors about rental real estate. Sometimes specific to Des Moines, Iowa. Sometimes in general, it's just good real estate information. And that's what this video was, is just good real estate investing information. So again, if you found value in this, please click subscribe on the video so that you can see all these new videos that we produce. And if you are looking for a strategic session with me where we just jump on a Zoom call and we talk through your certain situation and your personal situation, your business situation, what maybe some of your income situation is, or what you're looking to do to strategize in real estate investing, please reach out, schedule 30 minutes or so on my calendar. I'm happy to do that. Until my calendar is filled up, I will do as many of those as I possibly can. So again, that link is below in this YouTube video, and I will see you on the next video. See ya.